Right on, folks. Welcome to the third installment of this vintage Airstream trailer makeover. And speaking of vintage, I thought this was a 1959 Airstream Safari, but I was wrong. And I came to that conclusion by comparing this Airstream to pictures of Airstreams that I found online. Being that this Airstream has no tags on it, I did not know what year it was. But as you saw last time, in part 2, I was sandblasting the chassis. And in doing that, I found some numbers stamped into the A-frame tongue of the trailer, and I looked those up, and here's what I found. Okay, the VIN number I found stamped into the chassis is 22TS0625. So if you want to look up your VIN number, you can go to airstream.com, and they have a way here of looking up your VIN number. I looked through the different years, and this VIN number fit into the category of a 1961 Airstream made in California. So if we look at the first 2 digits, that is the length. So we have a 22-foot either Flying Cloud or Space Liner. If we look at T, T stands for twin bed. And then the next letter is S. That means it was made in the Santa Fe Springs plant in California. And if we look here at the 22-foot Flying Cloud, it shows that our ending numbers of 0625 puts it into the end of the production run for 1961. All right, just for fun, let's take a look at what was going on in 1961 when our Airstream was made. All right, January 20th, 1961, John F. Kennedy is sworn in as the 35th President of the United States. February 9th, the Beatles make their debut at the Cavern Club in Liverpool, England. 1961 is a huge year for space travel, as the Russians launch Yuri Gagarin into space to become the first man in space. Less than 1 month later, on May 5th, Alan Shepard becomes the first American in space. And one of the most popular cars on the road in 1961 is the Chevy Impala. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. All right, as many of you have commented there on the last video that I should replace this axle, and that's exactly what I'm thinking as well there. That's why I didn't put any paint on this. The angle of the dangle here on this is, I got this trailer upside down right now, but this is supposed to be at a 25-degree angle, and obviously it's not springing back. There is 4 rubber rods in here, and if we check out this video right here of Airstream making these axles. All right, you might ask, what gives that cloud-like cushioned ride to an Airstream travel trailer? And it is due in part to these rubber rods. Now these rods are frozen to 150 degrees below zero, and this shrinks the rod in diameter and enables them to slide this into the Duratorque axle. All right, and here Professor Peabody is going to take the frozen rubber rods and slide them right here inside the axle. And now we'll see a demonstration of the Airstream trailer while someone is performing cataract surgery inside. All right, here's a cutaway of the axle and the rubber rods, providing that cloud-like cushioned ride. Now you can get a replacement axle made by Dexter. And so I'm ordering up a new axle for this. And okay, this is where some crackpot modifications were made to the trailer. And I am going to patch in this cutout. Somebody did some modifications. So I have some 4-inch channel. I'm going to cut a piece of that out and weld that into that spot. But first, I have to clean up the edges so I can get my piece to fit in there nicely. Got the old Randy Richards scribe there. It's a nice tool. Thanks, Randy. Alright, you might think that we're looking at a salvaged piece of the Titanic, but no, this is some rusted parts of this chassis that I am going to cut off and replace. Alright, as you guys saw on the chassis, there were some pieces that had a lot of rust, so I cut those off, and to replace them, I had a company called Accurate Sheet Metal. They are over in Mukilteo, Washington, and they bent me up some pieces to replace those. So I'm going to weld those in. I just got done wiping those down with some acetone, cleaning those up, but now I'm going to have to cut this arced radius on one corner of the pieces. Okay, so to trace this arc onto this piece, I made a little pattern out of cardboard, and I'm holding it with a few magnets to hold this in place while I use the old Randy Richards scribe. Alright, this section right here is for this pull-out step, and this section is all messed up, so I think what I'm going to do is cut this off, make some new parts, fix up this step so this works once again. I think that's going to be nice to have that step to go up and into the trailer. Okay, I cut this old rusty crusty off of the old piece of the chassis. And what I want to do is I want to make this slot into this channel. So I'm going to use this as the pattern and get this lined up here as best I can. I'm coming in here. If you guys haven't used these, this is a Flymax paint marker, 0.7 millimeter fine point. These are great for doing this kind of thing. They write amazingly well on steel, and especially for transferring something like this with the fine point. So I'll just come and I'll trace this. All right, I got you guys set up behind the Bridgeport, get the bird's eye view from the back. But what I have set up is a 1/2 inch roughing end mill. I'm going to plunge into this and I'm going to take this path. I got this set up parallel with the table until I get down to this point here. I might have to do a little freestyling on the handles. That's why I got the camera set up behind right now. So I'm going to crank this up and cut on through. I just wanted to show you guys this step so you can follow along with what I'm doing. So, right, I cut this track down in here, and on this step, right, this step is going to pull out, and of course these two will be welded to the frame. But what this step has is a couple studs that stick out on each side, and that is what rides in this track. So you can see in the old rusty track, there is a pivot point for this arm. This arm swings freely. So that's up next. I got to drill a hole right here so I can attach this to this. And then this will be able to pull right out. And this just worked out great. This is going to be a really nice improvement. Check out how awesome this step is. So if you want to pop this step out, you got to reach underneath, pop it up, and then slide it down. And then this will lock into those little notches. All right, see, I got the little notch that I cut there and the track. So when this slides up, right, that hooks into that little notch. I'll show you from this side right there. See, that settles into that notch. Now that wasn't original on the original Airstream trailer. It had a little hook in the front, but hopefully this will keep this step up when this is traveling down the road. These 5 sheets of plywood that you saw me painting is going to be the floor for our Airstream trailer. This is 3/4 inch CDX plywood. And what I have done is I have painted the underside of the plywood with some black paint to seal that. So I'm going to flip these over, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some biscuits into the edge of these pieces of plywood to hold them together for our floor. Okay, for the biscuits, I'm going to put one every 6 inches. So I got the tape here, and I'm going to lay out every 6 inches. I will cut a spot with the biscuit joiner. Sheets laid out on the chassis for a test fit, and everything looks great. This is going to go nice and smooth. So now the goal is to pull these sheets apart. I'm going to use Sikaflex 1A as the adhesive sealant in between each sheet, and I'll be using a number 20 biscuit. I put the slots in there from the biscuit joiner, so I'm going to pull these apart, put that together right now. I also want to say, these sheets, I have considerable overhang. I made some extra overhang so I can come back and I can trim the sides of these down to size for our Airstream shell. It is now time to bolt our plywood floor down to the chassis of our trailer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the perimeter. I'm underneath the chassis here, and I'm just going to put a hole 6 inches into each one of these cross members around the perimeter, and that will hold the plywood down. And then I can use our pivoting mechanism, and I will tilt the trailer on its side, and then I can drill all the holes through these cross members and bolt down our floor. Okay, the elevator bolt that I happen to be using is a 1/4 20 elevator bolt, and elevator bolts have a flat top, so when you sink this into the floor, this will sit flush with our surface so we can put flooring on top of this without the top of the bolt protruding past the surface. It also has a square shank near the top of the bolt, so when you insert this down into the hole, it locks into the plywood to prevent it from spinning when you're putting the nut on. So from underneath, I'm going to put a washer, a 1/4 20 nut, and also a 1/4 20 nylock nut. This has a nylon washer in there that locks the nut to the threads. I'll also put a drop of blue Loctite to prevent this from rattling loose when the trailer is going down the road. Often these nuts and bolts work their way loose from vibration, so it's good to have something to hold this all together. be able to pivot this whole chassis up on its side and to be able to drill the holes through like that? Well, where I got the idea is from some old Airstream factory footage of when they were making these back in the day. Take a look. Okay, as you saw in the Airstream video, their method of locking the nut onto the bolt was to come in, put the nut on, and then bend the bolt over, and that kept the nut from vibrating loose from road vibration. But my way to do that is to come in with a little blue Loctite. I'll just put a little dab right on the threads, just a tiny bit, and then I'll come in with our 1/4-20 nylock nut and just spin that on. All right, our floor is all bolted down, and it's now time to cut out the wheel wells. All right, the reason why I rolled this trailer back under our Airstream shell is so I can lower this shell down onto the plywood, and I can accurately lay out the plywood to trim it to size. All right, after I trim it to size, I'm going to install some aluminum channel around the perimeter of the plywood, and then from there, I'll roll this back out, put it in our jig to flip it. I'll install some insulation on the underside, and I'll also be installing the aluminum underbelly. So you're not going to want to miss that in the next episode. I hope you guys are doing great, and I'll see you all soon. Right on.